Funding for Lawmakers comes from
the University of West Georgia in Carrollton, ensuring a better life for Georgians in the 21st century. More than 100 programs of study prepare students for successful careers in the critical professions of education and nursing, as well as business and the liberal arts. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of Georgia's business community, over 4,000 members strong, working with lawmakers for over 90 years to make sure that our state remains a place where companies thrive.
And by supporters of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Thank you.
Coming up on Lawmakers, the House passes a controversial measure to increase fines on super speeders. A Senate committee votes to ban embryonic stem cell research in Georgia. Opponents and proponents speak out. And the $18.9 billion 2009 amended budget heads to a House-Senate conference committee. Those stories and more are coming up next.
Live from Atlanta, this is Lawmakers. Here are your anchors, Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Hello, everyone. Also on tonight's broadcast, the Senate approves Governor Perdue-backed legislation to waive liability for landowners willing to open their property for agritourism purposes.
And the House adopts legislation aimed at building Georgia's workforce for high-demand, high-skill, high-paying jobs. But first, our top story tonight, legislation to increase fines on so-called super speeders passes the House. A bill backed by the governor that would tack on an additional fine to speeding tickets passed by a wide margin in the House earlier today. However, the so-called super speeder legislation was not without its detractors. Lawmakers Valerie Edwards joins us live at the Capitol with more. Valerie.
In Wandy, House Bill 160 targets the so-called habitual speeder. Here's how the measure works. $200 would be added to the cost of a speeding ticket if you're caught driving 85 miles an hour or more on the state's highways, or if you're clocked doing 75 miles an hour on a two-lane road. That fee is on top of whatever local authorities may charge. Monies generated from speedy drivers are intended to fund the state's trauma care network. That could be upwards of $23 million the first year. Administration Floor Leader Representative Jim Cole sponsored HB 160, which has the backing of Governor Perdue.
Trauma is a very important topic to us right now, and it's going to take time. This is not a panacea. This is not a silver bullet. We're going to educate. We're going to market. It'll be the first step towards letting people know as they enter this state that, listen, instead of speeding up just a little bit, just back off just a tad. Make it a little safer for everybody.
Those who oppose the measure say it's because the monies are not dedicated to trauma care, but instead go into the general treasury where anything can happen. Representative Sean Jurgensen was one of those who likened HB 160 to a new revenue-generating device.
I would kind of equate this to a tax, quite frankly, because nowhere in the bill did I see that it did anything other than provide for additional payment for this. There's no additional points, there's no additional penalties other than paying money to the state treasury for getting caught speeding.
Here's how Cole responded to that question.
And you've got some good points. And listen, we don't want this to be a revenue generator. Ideally, I would like to see the behavior in Georgia 10 to 15 years from now be where there was no money generated from this, because you know what that means? People are slowing down. There's less traumatic accidents.
Finally, HB 160 also says if you don't pay the $200 within 90 days, a fine of $50 attaches. Your license could be suspended, and it could cost up to $410 to get it back. HB 160 now heads over to the Senate for a vote. Reporting live, I'm Valerie Edwards for Lawmakers.
Okay, thanks for that report, Valerie. Well, as we mentioned earlier in this broadcast, the amended FY09 budget is headed to conference committee. On the House side, the conferees are Appropriations Chair Ben Harbin, Majority Leader Jerry Keene, and Speaker Pro Tem Mark Burkhalter. On the Senate side, the conferees are Appropriations Chair Jack Hill, Majority Leader Chip Rogers, and President Pro Tem Tommie Williams. The amended FY09 budget conference committee is scheduled to meet tomorrow morning. Well, there were several speakers in the well this afternoon who rose to discuss last Friday's heated debate over a rules change dealing with legislator status on tax returns. That resolution, SR 452, ended up failing. Senate Democratic leader Robert Brown, who was a focal point of the debate, began by thanking the lieutenant governor for allowing Thursday's debate to take place.
The lieutenant governor and his leadership helped this body through a very difficult period. And I know that there are probably going to be others, and I hope that he will continue to show and demonstrate the kind of strong and effective and unbiased leadership that he did during this process. And again, thank you, Lieutenant Governor.
Now, Senator Steve Thompson then followed by saying fellow legislators need to consider consequences in the future when filing certain types of legislation. Thompson added that he was inaccurately listed on a TV station, not GPV, as having not filed his returns, which is actually incorrect.
They called me yesterday. I called them back and told them I was current. But they called back this morning, apologized, and I simply asked that they make 67,000 calls to my district for me if they didn't mind and if they had time. But I just wanted to give an example of what can happen. You can stand up all day. I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty. And the more you say, the guiltier you are in the eyes of the people who would like to accuse you and those that they can convince. So I don't mind using myself as an example. I got receipts and I can handle it. I've been hit before and I'll be hit again, but I just want to caution y'all, whenever you do something, please remember that amongst the guilty, you usually hang about 99% of the innocent.
Senate President Pro Tem Tommie Williams then took the well to say debates like Thursday's became too personal and shouldn't happen in the future.
This needs to be a sacred place, and I would ask you, as we proceed along, I want to hear some legitimate, tough, interesting, impassioned debate from this well. But it makes us all look weak and immature when we let it sink beyond that level.
Again, last Thursday, SR 452 ended up failing to receive the 2/3 majority needed to pass.
SB 169, a bill that would prohibit creating new embryos for stem cell research, received a due pass from the Senate Health and Human Services Committee this morning. Lawmakers Brittany Evans was at that committee meeting. She joins us live from the Capitol with more. Brittany.
Thanks, Nwandi. The Ethical Treatment of Human Embryos Act was originally touted as the Octomom bill. That bill would have allowed the number of embryos, the number of embryos implanted through in vitro fertilization. Senator Preston Smith, chairman of the subcommittee, stripped that bill of in vitro language over the weekend and brought it before his subcommittee this morning.
SB 169 moved to the full committee where testimony continued. The bill's author, Senator Ralph Hudgens, explained Senator Smith's substitution.
The only thing that this bill regarding stem cell research is going to impede or prohibit would be the taking of human viable embryos that in the proper condition will become a child and prevent that from being killed and turning that into embryonic stem cells. Now, there's no prohibition here of any existing stem cell lines. You can continue that research.
Many opponents said that with an international biotechnology convention coming to Atlanta this May, the legislation sends the wrong message. But today, the governor made his case against stem cell research.
I'm absolutely opposed to creating and growing human embryos in order to create a cure for a disease.
The committee defeated a motion from Senator David Edelman to table the bill for further study. After the bill received the due pass, Senator Edelman expressed his disappointment.
This bill sends an unmistakable message that Georgia is a hostile place for scientific research. I'm hopeful we're gonna stop the bill before it gets to the governor's desk.
SB 169 now moves to the Senate Rules Committee. Reporting live at the Capitol, I'm Brittany Evans for Lawmakers.
Okay, thanks for that report, Brittany. Well, Senate Majority Leader Chip Rogers took a point of personal privilege this morning to defend a school voucher bill, which is currently in the Senate. There had been comments made that SB 90 would have a negative effect on the African-American community. Senator Rogers disagrees.
A growing body of evidence suggests strongly that vouchers improve academic performance, especially among African-American students, increase parent satisfaction and involvement. I'll be back to talk more about this subject, and I know you're probably anxiously awaiting, but the bottom line is It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to suggest that a parent, whether they're white, black, Latino, or anything, doesn't know better what's good for their student and what's good for their child. It makes no logical sense that a parent can't make a better decision, and anyone that comes to this well and suggests otherwise is wrong.
Now, SB 90 is currently in Senate rules and is expected on the Senate floor in the near future.
Atlanta developers planning to redevelop underground Atlanta want to include thousands of video lottery terminals in the new facilities. Representative Burke Day introduced House Bill 697 today, which would ban these terminals in Georgia. Representative Day explains his concerns.
What the bill aims to do is to make it abundantly clear that there's a legislative process to go through. I would hate to see the city of Atlanta in particular at this point in time initiate something that they believe is legal when it actually has to have legislative approval. The best we have right now is a pending letter from the State Attorney General seeking his opinion as to whether or not they can even do this. And the prevailing thought is that they can't. So this is just something to make it clear that it's a legislative process. I mean, even bingo is regulated. So the same would hold true here.
Well, the Senate got off to a late start today, but it didn't mean a lack of legislation. They actually passed 16 bills, and one of those extends the amount of prisoners who qualify for transitional centers to help alleviate Georgia's crowded prisons. Bill sponsor Senator Johnny Grant explains SB 193.
Research has shown that offenders who go through a reentry program such as a transitional center are up to a third more likely to succeed in maintaining a criminal-free life. Senate Bill 193 extends the classification of inmates who are eligible for those transitional centers, and it simply in lines 16 through 19 provides that during the final year of incarceration, an offender shall be eligible to be considered for participation in a departmental administered transitional center.
Now, after the 50-1 passage of SB 193, the Senate passed SB 152, which urges the governor to establish a half-dozen governor academies, working groups which study ways to reform education policies and practices. Senate Education and Youth Chairman Dan Weber explains SR 152.
At the end of last session, the governor appointed a group of 23 individuals to look at long-range planning for education in Georgia, with this report and these recommendations being the centerpiece of what we are to look at. What this resolution does is it calls for that working group to continue its work and to look at specifically the possibility of creating about a half-dozen governors' academies scattered throughout Georgia in a representative fashion to implement and demonstrate some of these recommendations in tough choices or tough times.
The Senate also adopted another resolution from Senator Weber, which establishes and regulates education improvement districts. SR 153 ended up passing along with another resolution from Senator Lester Jackson, which urges the Board of Regents to establish teacher education programs at each of the four-year universities. The goal is to address the state's current teacher shortage.
The House today voted to continue operation of the State Commission on Family Violence. That commission was slated to sunset next year and was a proposed cut from the reformed Department of Human Resources. House Bill 385 passed 146-6, allowing that commission to continue indefinitely. House Bill 228, reorganizing the Departments of Human Resources and Community Health, is currently being considered by the House Appropriations Committee. Legislation targeted at improving graduation rates passed out of the House today, and lawmakers Minu Hosseini has more on that. Minu.
And Wandi, House Bill 400 not only aims to improve high school graduation rates, but it would also provide focused studies or majors in certain fields so that high school students can graduate prepared for the job force or post-secondary careers. Bill sponsor Representative Fran Millar explains.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Speaker because everybody knows what the bill is after he's touted it throughout the state. Very much appreciated. Secondly, I'd like to thank the Department of Education. They've made some good enhancements to this bill in the past year, including individual graduation plans, strengthening dual enrollment. And I guess the last thing I'm going to say is this bill is about giving some children, young people, hopes and expectations. It's not about school boards. It's not about principals. It's not about teachers. And I've been pleased with the reception, the bipartisan support, and I urge your favorable consideration.
And this is not the first time that we've seen the bridge bill. Last year, the Building Resourceful Individuals to Develop Georgia's Economy Act passed through the House but was tabled by the Senate just 2 days before sine die.
And Wandi, House Bill 400 passed with little debate, 153-2, and now moves over to the Senate. Reporting live, I'm Minu Hosseini for Lawmakers.
All right, thanks so much, Minu. The House also voted to extend cost of living increases to current state employees and retirees by discontinuing that practice for workers hired after June of this year. Representative Debbie Buckner sponsors House Bill 452.
What this would do is say that starting in July of this year, cost of living increases would not be allowed to the new employees, so that the money saved there would go towards pre-funding the cost of living increase for all of our current employees and our current retirees.
That measure passed without opposition and moves to the Senate. The House also agreed to change the terms for participation in the Superior Court Clerk's Retirement Fund. Here's Representative John Meadows with HB 487.
What this bill does is change the amount of the monthly contribution rate to those people who are in the fund from $50 to $100. The second thing it does is it changes some of the fees and where those fees go. It would cost approximately $80,000 statewide. We have not received any negative feedback from the ACCG on that, and I would ask that you support this.
HB 487 passed 157-1 and now moves to the Senate.
One of the bills resurrected from last year has made it one step closer to becoming law. The Senate overwhelmingly passed the Landowners Protection Act today. Emily Banks has this report.
Senate Bill 75 would waive landowners' liability for any death or injury to a hunter or fisherman on their property. Bill sponsor Senator Bill Heath explained the legislation in the Senate.
And essentially what this does is it sets forth some language that would go in a contract or on a sign if you're going to allow people to access your property for agritourism or to hunt and fish, grant a little immunity to the landowner.
And in an interview, Heath said he expects SB 75 will have more success before this session ends.
Well, I've had the chairman of House Judiciary ask me how the bill's coming. He's apparently looking forward to getting it in there and helping us get the bill passed. I would say that he must recognize that this will open up some additional lands for Georgians to enjoy.
The bill was proposed by Governor Perdue and would become effective upon his signature. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Emily Banks.
And SB 75, the Landowners Protection Act, now goes over to the House.
Well, in the House today, there was a vote to charge criminal defendants sentenced to day reporting centers for some of the costs of their stay. Representative Steve Davis encouraged his colleagues to adopt the $10 per day fee in House Bill 344, but Representative Al Williams wondered whether this would be feasible.
Phase 1 would still be exempt from this. It's not actually in the legislation, but Phase 1 reporters are for the first 45 days, so they have time to establish themselves in the community after their incarceration.
Well, gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
I understand the Phase 1 with the 45 days, but we're over 8% with unemployment, and I'm hearing reports of people, professionals, that have been looking for jobs almost a year. What's the chances of an ex-felon finding a job in 45 days in this economy?
Well, and I don't know what the odds on that, Representative. However, we didn't make this mandatory, and it will be to the judge's discretion, and obviously there'll be circumstances that he would have to take into consideration.
HB 344 did pass 102-58. It now moves over to the Senate. Representative Lynn Walker led to the passage of House Bill 306 that's encouraging statewide use of pretrial electronic monitoring for defendants.
It wasn't too many weeks ago that a defendant cut his ankle monitor in a Big Lot parking lot in Monroe, Georgia, At 5:59 p.m., at 6:01 p.m., the sheriff was notified of that monitor being cut. The cost per day for those inmates in this particular county jail is $45 per day. The cost of a monitor for those the same 100 inmates is about $8 per day. Now, doesn't take much of a mathematician to figure out that the potential annual savings for that one county, if just 100 of their inmates were released with electronic pretrial monitoring devices, the savings to the taxpayers would be over $1.3 million.
House Bill 306 moved without opposition. It goes over to the Senate next. The House also voted to allow those under court protective orders to withhold their address information when registering to vote. Here's Representative Katie Dempsey.
A lady who was living in a family violence shelter tried to vote but protect her address so that her perpetrator could not find her. And we did not have that pathway or that avenue to allow her to vote and to not reveal that address and not only put herself but all the residents of that shelter in danger. The bill allows individuals who have received a court-issued protective order or restraining order or who are bona fide residents of a family violence shelter to keep their addresses confidential and still be allowed to vote.
HB 306 passed without dissenting vote and now moves to the Senate. Well, hundreds of Alzheimer's patients, caregivers, and advocates were at the Capitol today, urging legislation to protect Georgians with cognitive impairments and asking lawmakers to ensure that these programs are funded.
The things that you do from a fundraising capacity year-round on an ongoing basis helps us to have the funding that we need to find a cure, to either prevent this disease, to stabilize it, or reverse those that are in the throes of it.
While the General Assembly debates the merits of stem cell research, Jenny Helms of the Alzheimer's Association says this is not an issue for Alzheimer's research.
We don't think that stem cell research is going to do as much for persons with Alzheimer's as it would somebody else with a disease that affects certain regions of the brain, like Parkinson's disease.
The Alzheimer's Association is supporting HB 457, which adds Alzheimer's to the list of adult disabilities qualifying for protection against exploitation. The organization is also requesting restoration of over $415,000 to the 2010 budget for respite care.
If you have a parent or loved one or husband or wife that has Alzheimer's, it's really a 7x24 caregiving assignment, because you really can't afford to let them get much out of your sight because of the things that can happen to them.
And even if there's limited money available, Senate Resolution 257 may create an Alzheimer's disease task force to explore options for the future.
We in the General Assembly are very much aware and are doing what we can with the limited resources we have to try to provide as humane care and as loving care for those folks that have experienced this terrible disease.
SR 257 is in the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, and HB 457 is being considered by the House Health and Human Services Committee.
Well, in the wake of controversy over a $100,000 bonus awarded to the Georgia Lottery CEO, the Senate Economic Development Committee passed legislation that would require the Georgia Lottery Board of Directors to provide a certain percentage of funds to education before providing employee bonuses. Lawmakers' Tiana Fernandez has the story.
Before today's meeting, the law required that 35% of lottery proceeds return to education programs. Although there has been a steady increase in the overall dollars of lottery revenue and employee bonuses, the percentage provided for education has continued to decrease. As a solution, Senator Chip Pearson proposed Senate Bill 243.
The concern that I and many others have is that since its existence, the statutory requirement here has only been met once.
According to Senator Pearson, the last time the Georgia Lottery Board of Directors met the requirement was in 1995, and that they don't really intend to do anything about the steady decline. Last year, the percentage funded for education was under 25%.
The fact that we have only met or exceeded that one time, and the fact that we have continually stated that if that's an unrealistic number, then give us a number which would be realistic.
The committee made the final decision to change the 35% requirement to 30% and passed SB 243 by committee substitute. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Tiana Fernandez.
A bill that seeks to modify Georgia laws pertaining to the disclosure of child abuse records was heard in committee today. Bill sponsors say the modifications will put Georgia in compliance with federal public records laws and increase transparency in the state's child protective system. Alan Friedman has more.
The House Children and Youth Committee met today to discuss SB 79, a bill that would provide access by certain governmental entities and individuals to reports of child abuse. Tom Rawlings, director of the Office of Child Advocate, explains.
Our current law says that if a child dies as a result of abuse, that and there has been some defects involvement, that the public has the right, or those, including policymakers, I would add, have the right to look at those records to see what exactly our state child welfare agency did or did not do to protect that child, to sort of go back over the case, see where we could have done things better. This bill simply expands that authority to look into those situations out to where a child has suffered a critical injury as defined by a doctor.
The bill received a due pass recommendation and now moves to House rules. If the bill does not pass, Georgia will not be in compliance with federal law and will therefore not be eligible to receive certain federal funds. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Alan Friedman.
Senator John Douglas took a point of personal privilege this morning to report an incident where last year's gun carry bill, HB 89, was not enforced. In this instance, MARTA Security seized a firearm from a licensed gun carrier. HB 89 allows this gentleman to carry on a mass transit, and Douglas has filed an open records request to MARTA.
This senator will and did today file an open records request with MARTA for their policy regarding HB 89. And should they ignore my request, other options are available. It's time for MARTA to get their act together. It's time for MARTA to train their officers in the law before they send them out to enforce the law. The MARTA Police Department, like every other law enforcement agency, will enforce the laws passed by the people of this state. Nothing more, nothing less. If they can't or won't do that, we can deal with that as well.
Well, on a lighter note, when Miss Georgia visited the General Assembly today, she brought her tiara, sash, winning smile, and the gift of song.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above.
I've been singing since the age of 3. So one might say that my next best form of interpretation or expression next to the English language is music.
God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you.
Chastity Hardman received her bachelor's degree in music from Georgia State University. She was the first runner-up in the Miss America pageant. Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, we will continue our leadership series with Senator David Edelman, Senate Democratic Whip. We'll have that interview and all the latest Capitol news tomorrow night on Lawmakers at 7 p.m. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. on GPB or 7 a.m. on GPB Knowledge. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Georgia Gazette. Coming up next year on GPB Television, Art Wolf's Travels to the Edge. Tonight's episode features the Baja Peninsula. That program's coming up next year on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 28th legislative day of the 2009 session of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm David Zelski.
And I'm Nwandi Lawson. Join us tomorrow at 7 for Lawmakers. Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.